live stream. It is part 2 of Intro to DAOs. We talked last week about what DAOs are, how they work, and had a couple people on from different DAOs. This week is a follow-up, and we're going to focus more on DAO tooling. So thank you for joining us. And we've got some special guests and the committee members. So let's first start with our committee members. We have Cheyenne Eskandari. Cheyenne's our committee leader. Will you introduce yourself, Cheyenne?
Hello, everyone. I'm Cheyenne, CTO at Ether Capital, and been in CP for almost 2 years. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Our other committee member who has joined is Kent. Kent, will you say hello, please?
Hey, friends. I'm Kent, former head of R&D at Centralized Shapeshift, and now I'm the tokenomics workstream leader at the Shapeshift DAO, and a huge fan of ETH, C4, and all things DAO.
Cool. Josh, he's a committee member for the CEP committee and also a board member. So 2 things. Josh, you want to explain what you do?
Hey, everyone. Not much to add on to that, but I'm very excited to hear from our guests. So let's move on to them.
Yes, yay. Thank you to our guests for joining us today. We are super excited to have you here. You are in the DAO world. You have a lot to tell us about it. So we're excited to hear from each of you. So let's start with Josh first from Opolis. Josh, I have the same shirt you have. It's very soft. So could you introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about Opolis?
Sure. We're very proud of our ETH Denver quality shirts. I'm Joshua, 0x Joshua online. I'm the executive community steward of Opolis, a member of Metacartel and one of the core stewards of ETH Denver and the Buffcorn Biddle Brigade.
Cool, thank you. All right, Ted, will you introduce yourself next? Ted, also known as T Wells on Discord.
Sure. GM, everybody. Happy to be here. I too have a pretty rad Opolis shirt. Appreciate it, Josh. You got a haircut since last time I saw you, sir. Looking good. I have a background in education before bridging to Web3. I currently contribute at OneHive Shapeshift and in and around the Gnosis chain ecosystem. So yeah, glad to be here.
Very cool, thank you. And then we have Leon and Ian, both from Secret DAO. So Ian, do you want to start first, introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I'm Ian. I'm the CEO of Secret LLC, and we build Secret DAO and secretnodes.com. But with Secret DAO, we're essentially building privacy preserving DAO tooling for NFT collections and those with secret tokens on the Secret network.
Very cool. And Leon, you are also from Secret DAO. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so my name is Leon. I work with Ian over at Secret LLC. And I do a lot of the design and a little bit of like the partnership management, stuff like that. But wear a lot of hats, me and him both. So yeah, excited to be here.
That's one of the cool things I think about DAOs. It's like all hands on deck, whatever you're good at, you do. It's sort of like spread out to multiple different things for every person involved, kind of like a small organization. So that's really cool. So let's first talk a little bit. Let's introduce what a DAO is and then talk about DAO for tooling. So let's do a quick intro to what a DAO is. Kent, would you explain that to us and maybe the idea of progressive decentralization?
Sure, Jessica. So yeah, you know, the idea of DAOs has been around since almost as long as Ethereum, really. This idea that you could have an organization whose fundamental rules are ensconced in smart contract code living on a decentralized blockchain. So you have a distributed or decentralized autonomous organization. In practice, things aren't exactly very autonomous at the moment. You know, it's not like there's AIs running these things just yet. We don't have Skynet DAO, but it is, you know, properly distributed DAOs are very decentralized. So effectively, at least in my mind, definitions might vary, but it's an organization that has its own form of governance on the blockchain, which gives rise to like governance tokens, and also has a way to leverage the inherent transparency of the blockchain to make sure that everybody can see what's going on, we might cover that later that in this session, more about the fine line between transparency and privacy. And also very crucially, it leverages the inherent permissionlessness of blockchains, meaning that, generally anybody around the world can come and contribute to these things, of course, within the rules of like the DAO ecosystem. So that's kind of one definition I think that can apply to most DAOs.
Very cool. Thank you. So I think that was a good intro to what DAOs are. What do we mean by tooling? Who wants to jump in? Or I'll call on someone. Does anyone want to explain what we mean by DAO tooling?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay, cool. It's okay. We're used to it. We all work from home. There's going to be noise.
It's the cat food dispenser. So with tooling, I'm pretty sure we're going to be on the same page about this. It's really just giving people the tools that they need to be able to deploy a DAO, kind of determine the stakeholders in the DAO, voting rights, the ability to coordinate with proposals and kind of discuss through that. And I mean, you can, without tooling, it's just pretty technical, I suppose. But with tooling, it lowers the barrier for the average person to be able to do it rather simply, if the tooling is simple.
Right. Yeah. So anybody who's in a DAO, what kind of tooling have you used or seen being used as a contributor to a DAO?
I've seen like boards where you can make the proposals. Like there's one of these on the Secret network and a few of them being developed still, but essentially like a place where you can submit a proposal, you can put in the text for the proposal, and other participants, stakeholders that have the token can vote on that. Yep.
Anything else anyone wants to add?
I want to just add something based on the last week's conversations that we talked about DAO in general, how the contribution works. Like we talked about Discord, how we can have like these permission DAOs or permissionless DAOs. There's all the conversations are public. So at the end of the day, like if you consider like on-chain DAO, like basically every data is available for everyone to see and they can interact with, but it's a barrier, it's a technical barrier to enter. Like you need to know how to send a transaction to a contract, but you can abstract these all within the good UI and UX design. So at the end of the day, you don't have to know as a DAO contributor or someone that is voting on a DAO, you don't have to know what is underneath. And a lot of them are also just helper tools, just to visualize like the votes that like other things coming. And we're going to see a lot more coming out because we're learning as we go. And a lot of things we see that based on how you visualize the votes, you might impact how people are voting before the proposal ends, like all other aspects that we can see. And the transparency is both a good thing and a bad thing here because it could be noisy, but we have to like, these tools help to figure out how to do. And I'm interested to know about like other tools we have here because we have really good guests here and I want to hear more about what tools you use.
Yeah, likewise. Ted, do you have any tools that you use that you want to talk about that you're using as a contributor or that any of the DAOs you work with use?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, we're actually working on a sort of video related to tooling options. And I think it's worth, one of our challenges was to like figure out how to categorize them because there are a lot. And like I default to categorizing things, I guess, but for governance, obviously OneHive has built a front end or like, you know, essentially a UI that is, it's a fork of different components of Aragon and integrated Bright 80 technology for simple resistance. It's sort of a novel governance tool that does not involve a downvote, for example, but integrates conviction voting, fancy math stuff. It's a, for example, so this is specifically Gardens. It is a multi-sigless funding front end. So like the vote, whatever the vote turns out to be, like if a proposal passes, it will execute on chain directly. And so there is a backstop known as Celeste. I don't want to rant too much about this, but like there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the governance space. There's a lot of interesting tools. We use Superfluid for our contributors right now, in combination with Coordinape on the the compensation side. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have other things that they could add to either of those categories. I guess coordination, I think DWork is a really cool tool. It's a nice bridge for people who are familiar with like Web 2 UI, but it integrates a lot of cool stuff. So like, I don't want to continue just listing stuff off. I don't know if there's any other related tools people have been using recently, but we find a lot of those very useful.
It's funny that you mentioned layer 2, because I think you're talking to a lot of new people who are just kind of not even in crypto that much, but somehow making their way into DAOs and trying to contribute and maybe earn their first, their first revenue somehow in this space. Then they're suddenly, thrown into this, oh, okay, well, we can send you your funds and it's over here in this other system. And, before even understanding really what Ethereum is, or any other space, now suddenly they're being told to go access, some other L2 technology and figure that out. Do you think there's still, like, even before governance, like a strong learning curve that we need to get past on usability of our basic tools that we use every day? I think we kind of take advantage of them, or take for granted sometimes.
I mean, personally, I was talking about this with somebody the other day. It's like the number of times when the camera isn't on, I'm not on a call where this tool will never experience adoption. Highly frustrating, like even for people who are in the space. So let alone people who are new, right? For sure. I think in part, Jess, this is what we're up to, trying to help educate people to like at the very beginning, to make it less friction for people to understand how to use these different tools, right? And access them, as you're saying, if they're not all within a single ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think is pretty interesting about using different tools in a DAO, normally when you start working with a new, organization or company, you've got kind of like that onboarding process. Here's what we use. And at least for me in education, the tools were like 20 years old, but they were still like, super modern and cool for the education world. But with DAOs, like when I started to participate, it was like, here's like 50 things that you need to know. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. There's so many different options, but I think it's getting better. Like already, even like over the last few months, it seems like the tooling is improving. The like way to explain how the tools work is improving. And I would say one thing that is kind of a challenge with the tools is there are so many, and there are many that do something similar or slightly different. And it's like figuring out what tools being used. And then sometimes suddenly it's like, but now we're using this, or now we're using this, which I think can be a challenge in general when you're learning something new. But at the same time, like it's kind of fun learning new stuff all the time. It's not just like one thing every day. We've probably all had that job. It's like something new and exciting all the time. So for people that get easily bored, I don't know, DAOing it sort of seems like a good way to not get bored.
One thing I want to add, like you're right about this, all the tools, and they're all like under heavy development, so they change every day. And one thing I noticed was basically working with some people that work on DAOs. I was like watching like over the shoulder to see how the payment flow works, like propose for the payment and revenue, and they were running into errors. And based on like the inspect elements, I saw the errors, and it was a JavaScript error that one field was not defined. So I was like, all right, this is open source. You can go to GitHub, file this issue, and it was fixed within like a day. But that whole mindset that if you see an error here, you can report it, and how you can report it. Like, I haven't seen that much of educational material there, but it could be really useful as a feedback loop for every tool. Some of the tools I've seen that, like, do you see an issue? Like, click here. Like, I've seen that. That's a really good thing. I just want to like emphasize how this feedback loop can help with all the workflows, because everyone's basically like by using the tool or testing the tool and can give feedback to anyone that is like outside the development team or inside the development team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about some of the pain points of DAOs and what some of the tools that exist do for these pain points. So does anyone want to start by explaining what some of the challenges are with working or contributing to a DAO, and any of the tools that help make this easier?
I guess if nobody else wants to start, I'll dive right into that one. Opolis, what we do is help contributors to DAOs process their payroll compliantly and access high quality group rate benefits like health insurance, dental, vision. So one of the things that we hear a lot just in the DAO space is people who are like, I don't know where I'm going to get my health insurance from, or they don't know how to pay their taxes. They're, let's say, an NFT flipper, or you've just gone through a coordinate round and you've been issued additional DAO shares. How do you handle this new income? And how do you contribute to DAOs in general? And so through our process, we help professionalize people's business. So don't contribute to a DAO as an individual, because then you're kind of engaging in a general partnership. So if you wrap yourself in an LLC, your company is engaging with the DAO, and then there's limited liability on both your side and the DAO side. So there's a number of things that we help with to like kind of professionalize the way that you engage with DAOs to make it a little bit more safe.
Yeah, and I know a number of people who are using Opolis to do this already to make things a little bit easier and safer. Opolis has been around for a while, and it's kind of interesting that it's been around for a while, but now suddenly it seems like so much more important with this new influx of all of the DAOs. And what you all are doing is, I think it's important. And also one of the challenges I would say is the payment process of getting paid. And especially if you just join the space and you're just learning the tech, no longer, something simple where it's going. Did my audio just go out for a second? No?
It did for a second.
Okay. So like the payment process of it is challenging in general because it's no longer simple like Bitcoin to Bitcoin address or ETH to ETH address. In most cases, it's you getting paid maybe partially in the native token for that DAO, and then trying to figure out if you need to, switch into USD or whatever. You can speak more about that, maybe, Joshua.
Yeah, and I don't particularly want to sound like a Midwestern boomer being like, in my day, we had to go to school uphill both ways in the cold. But like the kids these days, the people who are processing payroll and working in DAOs now have it so easy compared to what we used to have to deal with. And one of the processes that we do is help it so you can skip like Kraken or Coinbase as your off ramp. So you get paid natively in like wrapped XDAI or DAI or USDC or USDT or Fox, for example. And you're able to process that payroll directly through Opolis without having to go through an exchange, which is a major. Whose video froze? Did my video freeze? Am I still here?
You're here.
Okay, cool. I'm in the desert, so who knows how the internet works out here. I don't know what I was saying.
Yeah, Josh, just kind of building on that, that's an interesting approach and an interesting contrast. Like, so kind of building on what other Josh, C4 Josh was just saying earlier about like, layer 2 and kind of getting your head around that, sort of combining all these thoughts. So what Shapeshift does is we pay contributors on Colony via XDAI/Gnosis chain. And I was actually using this last night, just, bridging some funds over. And even as somebody who's been in crypto for a while, like, it's a very methodical process. You have to be very careful. You just want to double check everything. And then, so you bridge over into the mainnet, and then presumably you might want to send that into Coinbase or something. So in the case of what you guys are doing with Opolis, that's a nice way to kind of circumvent some of those frictions. I think one challenge for people that join Shapeshift and other DAOs is like, if they're not crypto native, they need to get their heads around these things pretty quickly. And I worry sometimes that it might be a little bit too intimidating, and that maybe they want to contribute, but they'll just bounce because it's like, wait, this is like a little bit too much to do. But on the other hand, it's kind of cool because the very act of learning all this stuff, learning how to get paid and how does this all work, that in itself makes contributors more crypto savvy and just brings them further down the rabbit hole. So I suppose it's a bit of a double-edged sword there.
With Secret DAO, what we've kind of noticed as a pain point, it's very interesting to hear the pain points you guys brought up, first of all. But one of the major pain points that we've noticed is from people that have existing communities that want to empower those stakeholders in that existing community to be a part of a DAO. And it's interesting because it's not looking at it from a perspective of we're going to launch a DAO and we don't have a community yet, or we don't have an organized community yet. Like a big pain point there is essentially them all deciding even how the DAO will initially work. So how we've tried to tackle that is in designing some of this stuff, we're trying to make the DAOs flexible enough to adapt later. So there's an initial set of rules you would have from the start, and then the stakeholders can vote to change those rules. Has its pros and cons, right? Like if you empower people, like let's say it's an NFT community and every NFT, it has like one vote, like one NFT doesn't have a higher weight than another, and you wanted to change that system, you know, maybe somebody that would lose voting power wouldn't want to vote yes on that. So there's like some pros and cons, but a lot of the problems we've been trying to design for come from the aspect of most of the people we're working with already have an established community and they're not organized. They don't have the tooling yet. So yeah, that's I guess that's the angle we come at it from.
Yeah, I also wanted to touch on that just a little because Ian said NFT and then I got excited. So we work quite a bit with NFT communities, and one of the biggest, I guess, pain points for them and their DAOs is just being able to, I don't want to say the word scale because I've used it so much, but scale their community in terms of like adding utility to their NFT project, or even building a token, or however, whatever it takes to develop something that would actually add value to the DAO. A lot of the times these NFT communities just don't have the resources to continue building, other than like, you know, organizing themselves on Discord or Telegram or something like that. So something that we try to, I guess, provide for them is just an easy accelerant, quote unquote, to continue building for their community, including, you know, automation of token creations, or even having a central place to discuss and vote on things. All that stuff takes developer hours. And with DAO tooling, any platform that offers DAO tooling, they kind of essentially cut that portion out. Although I don't want to say cut out a dev because it's pretty important, but it's just kind of a way to go around having to have a dev immediately at the start of your DAO.
That reminds me of kind of early in the crypto space, and honestly, still to this day, probably. Basically, if you were a even medium-sized crypto company, you know, whatever that meant in 2016, 2017, 2018, you pretty much always rewrote the fact like your wallet software internally. Like you had a way to process like incoming funds, create transactions, send transactions, and every single business in the space had rewritten this exact same code. And it seems like we're kind of now in that space with DAOs where, you know, everyone's recreating kind of proposal infrastructure themselves. But it seems it looks nice that there's businesses now focusing on that, or organizations focusing on that and bringing that tooling, because, you know, not every DAO should be about building a DAO. These DAOs should be about building the product, the service, the community that they're trying to focus on. It shouldn't be about all of them creating the tooling. So it's great that there's some DAOs focused on tooling so that the rest of us can get past that and just go do some other fun things with the space.
Especially with the NFT communities, like I also don't want to understate the value of having a developer. Plenty of them will need one or more for multiple reasons, but really at the end of the day, a lot of NFT communities, they want to make more art. They want feedback from their stakeholders on like other aspects of how that DAO would function. They want to make decisions on should the DAO buy other people's art and hold it and things like that. They don't actually want to spend the time building that tooling. They just want to do those things. And that makes sense from a lot of angles, especially with like a group of artists or, art lovers, or however you want to, look at how some of these communities are.
I think with building the tools, if you're building all of the tools that you need, in addition to the products and services or whatever else that you're doing, it's kind of like I'm sure we've all heard this example of like flying an airplane while you're putting it together, but it's like all these other people are like, no, we've got the wings, like the engine's here, like just here, you can use it. One of the challenges I think is like, well, which engine or which wing? Because in some cases there's multiple different options, and it's trying to kind of like weed through what the best option is and figure out like how to get buy-in from other people in the DAO. And then there's, if you're going to vote in using it, or if it's sort of like someone can decide, there's all these different elements to it, which again, I think is kind of fun, but it can definitely be a challenge as well.
Yeah, I think it can definitely lead to a lot of fatigue. I mean, I'm in at least a couple DAOs where there's a joke basically of put it to a vote, because so many things were put to a vote that no one wants anything ever put to a vote anymore. It's like, well, no, how do we now like kind of roll up these into one single vote? And in a way, that's just these organizations kind of finding their own efficiencies. I hope the tooling is also kind of helping facilitate that too.
I kind of want to make a comparison. It's like for most of these DAO communities, it's like, think about having to recreate a Facebook every time that you make a community, right? Or like a Facebook group, but that functionality, right? Imagine having to continue to rebuild the same thing over and over and over just to get on the same playing field as a community that's already been established. To me, it's just kind of silly to have to dedicate developer hours to recreating something that pretty much already exists. So that's just a comparison that I had in my head. And I always compare Facebook because it's so easy to make a group on Facebook and have people post or, offer things up. Of course, they might not have the same thing as like a DAO community in itself with like voting and on-chain stuff. But to me, essentially, it's just the same thing as creating a Facebook group, but with more functionality.
Well, that's like, but the difference between that and Web3 is that Facebook owns the entire content and the reputation is not portable. And it was interesting that Reddit tried to experiment with this with their, I can't remember what they're called, the moons or something, where the reputation from a subreddit could be portable to some sort of other place, which would be, that would be Web3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else have anything to add to that? Josh,
well,
did you?
On the note of Facebook kind of owning all that, I guess privacy is an interesting thing to add to this, because with DAOs, like the majority of DAOs that exist, the stakeholders are all public. The holding, like the DAO Treasury holdings and things like that, it's all public. Definitely a privacy advocate in general, which is why we're on Secret Network. But I think that's one of the things that's going to be really important about DAOs in the future. Like DAOs, if we're saying like DAOs are the decentralized version of corporations or something like that, what corporation, like of any size really, do you know of that would want their balance sheet public and like their stakeholders all public? Maybe they want to decide to have some of the stakeholders public. Maybe they maybe they want to have the proposals that they put out viewable by the public. But a lot of private companies probably wouldn't actually put like their company meetings or like their internal votes public. So I think, as the tooling, expands to have more privacy features, I think people are going to want it a lot more. But I got into crypto, even though crypto like Bitcoin wasn't private or whatever, right? So still love it all, but I do think the privacy aspect is going to get more important for DAOs.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of parallel because like you can sort of apply the traditional paradigm of strategic privacy, and of course individual privacy is always important as well, especially like at the contributor level. I think it's good that there's pseudo-anonymous contributors in DAOs. On the other hand, of course, 99% of blockchains minus the Zcashes and Moneros, and a new technology too, is everything is by default transparent. So I think one effective way to handle this is really to lean into that transparency and be like, okay, we're gonna basically implement extreme transparency and leverage benefits from that. So for example, everything we do with respect to tokenomics at Shapeshift is out in the open. Our balance sheet, dashboards, is out for anybody to see. You can look at Zapper or Etherscan and get a very quick sense of our financial state. And I love this. It's like a beautiful contrast to like the proverbial smoke-filled room of TradFi and like, hidden risk and everything like that. Everything is out in the open. We meet every Tuesday and talk about tokenomics. Everything is out in the open. Anybody can contribute. There are rare cases where we do want to kind of have sort of like closed room decisions, talking about like strategic partnerships. Of course, we want to be respectful of our partners' strategic privacy, but I think some cool dynamics can emerge when you're just open about everything. Salaries are out in the open and everything. And some people that might not really resonate, but the people that do like that transparency self-select and like, okay, I want to be a part of this because it's such a break from the traditional paradigm.
I actually agree with everything you said there, and I think that that's really important. Specifically, I should have said when I was originally talking that I believe the DAO stakeholders and like whoever deploys the DAO, they should be able to decide what is private and what isn't, right? So like on Ethereum, typically you don't really have the decision, but with like programmable privacy, you can say, hey, we're creating this DAO. We want it to be transparent here, 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 and here. But maybe we don't want the public addresses of our stakeholders to be public. Okay, that could be a decision somebody makes. Or maybe there's a type of proposal that you only want people that are stakeholders in the DAO to be able to see that type of proposal. That would just be a decision that the DAO made. So the way that we look at it from a tooling creation is DAOs are sovereign. We don't want to dictate how it works to the DAO creator. We just want to give them the tools. So if they want to make it all public, they definitely can. They could make anything public that they want. But if they want specific things or everything private, they can also do that, which I think is kind of interesting. And other things that could be done that I don't think a lot of people talk about, but if we're talking transparency, there are ways that you can make something like a DAO treasury kind of transparent and kind of private. Like maybe it says the total value of assets in the DAO, and maybe it doesn't reveal all positions or all trades and things like that, which could be useful for various different use cases depending on what the DAO does. Like if it's in DeFi, maybe it would be good to selectively, decide when to disclose certain positions for trading purposes, or just there's a whole litany of reasons. I actually like transparency a lot with cryptocurrency. I just also like the idea that I could decide what is private and what isn't, or that collectively we all could.
Yeah, well said, Ian. I really like how secret it was. It seems like it was kind of a little bit inspired by Zcash in terms of you can decide what you want. It's kind of like that sliding scale. Like Do you want to just have a normal transaction as Zcash, or do you want to go shielded? It's up to the user, and being able to apply that to entire blockchains and everything that might happen on it is powerful. So I'm excited to see what people do with like your technology, like what sort of trade-offs they decide to make, or what sort of balance they strike with these two forces, privacy and transparency.
Yeah, like one thing, and Ian said about the options to have, like it comes back to last week we shortly talked about that. But one of the things I love about the open source and blockchain and this transparency is like every time you don't agree with the team, you can just fork, and if there's like enough support, that is the one that continues. That's like a beauty of this space. And to what Ian was saying, like the options you have, like you have the option to do it like everyone else, or do it like the way you want it. So all those are the things that we didn't have in a previous infrastructure, previous systems. It was like the way it was implemented, that's the way you should do it. But now anyone can start poking around, changing things, and see if that works. Which might be a good thing, just if we want to go to like signaling and governance, which we can like move to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to introduce that a little bit, Cheyenne?
Sure, I can give like a bit background on like, because before the start, Jessica was talking about signaling too, which one of my early times that I got introduced to this concept was for Bitcoin blockchain and some of the updates that there used to be these, I mean, still is, but like the version part of the block, which the miners before the update, before a lot of changes, they would signal their support of the upcoming change by just changing some of the numbers there. And that was one of the first time I noticed, oh, that's a thing. Like even before implementing a lot of things, you can signal your support. Before voting, you can signal your support. And similar thing to like DAOs, I feel like there's a lot more people here that like actually felt this every day. But it's basically when you want to put a proposal, before you put all the time to implement all the details, you can ask for signals, and the community can signal that do they support this or not, and then you can put resources to actually implement that. I would like to know like what tools do you use? Is it just like Discourse forum or just the reaction emojis on like Discord? It was really interesting to know like what do you guys use in that sense, or what's the flow of the governance? Like maybe that's like another approach. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I like how you put that, Cheyenne. Ted, do you want to say anything about how people signal whether or not they are, into whatever is being proposed, or how it's shown that they don't agree with it, other than, maybe strictly voting? But I'd love to hear what you've seen.
Yeah.
Sure.
Was that Ted or Kent? Sorry.
I said Ted, but
Ted, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ted.
I'll pass to you, Ken, in a second.
I love everyone's excited.
Well, it's interesting because I'll try to bridge over from the previous conversation and comments just listening. I think like DAO culture is a super fascinating thing, and every DAO is different and in these super critical ways. And right now I feel like, there's this overlap between projects that are either existing or like soon to exist, and they have similar functionality, but on the other side of like an inevitable winnowing of that, it seems to me that tools will like adapt to the cultural needs that DAOs have. So like what we're then specifically to signaling, I think every DAO does have its different route. I know Shapeshift has a very clear way of approaching this that is effective at establishing alignment and like a common set of understandings. If you have a great idea, okay, what should you do? Whereas I say like OneHive is definitely, I think the ideation is purely in Discord and then to discourse. And I think that's not anything revolutionary, but I would say like there's less of a formal set of expectations with OneHive, and it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just, I said, it's a different sort of set of cultural norms. And so, if you have a great idea and you already have some degree of reputation in the community, in the case of OneHive, if you can get the conversation started on the Discord and you can get key stakeholders, buy into what you're trying to do, then the next logical step would be to move to the forum, where it's typically like a single forum post. We don't necessarily have a multiple step process here, but you'd expect to see a certain level of engagement, depending on what the proposal is all about, and then it would migrate over to the on-chain decision. So in the case of OneHive, like Snapshot is actually not a part of the equation, but I know it is for a lot of other DAOs. So it's a slightly different endpoint there, but that's, I guess, a brief summation.
Yeah, actually, before you jump in, I had a question about Opolis, Josh. So when you're asked by a DAO potentially to come and share what Opolis is doing, how does that work? Is it like do you reach out to, I mean, I'm sure there's different ways, but what I'm asking is there like a general consensus of the community that they want to hear what Opolis offers? Is it like one person? How does that work?
That's
like what you've seen?
That's a really good question. So it varies because DAOs aren't a monolith. So what one community does is not anything like one of the others. So Shapeshift, for example, there was this large scale plan to decentralize. They held all these, I know you guys don't call them pods, you call them teams.
Those are work streams.
Work streams. I think there's a few others that call it work streams too. So like a work stream leader would approach us and say, hey, can you do a presentation to our work stream? In most cases, because it's opt-in, as soon as somebody discovers us, they'll just reach out and say, oh yeah, I'm part of Gitcoin DAO, and then they'll join. And then, for example, Kernel, we're now like part of the onboarding process. So as people join this cohort, they're like, oh, okay, this is how you get your benefits. There's only one case where, well, all right, so some of the more centralized and I'm going to say not DAOs, will have like one ops person who's like a gatekeeper. And so if they, from this very Web2 HR perspective, determine that Opolis is a thing that can benefit their community, they'll help move forward with it. Or if they're not able to see the Web3 vision because they're stuck in old ways, they will gatekeep and prevent other members of the DAO from being able to access it, which has happened a few times. The only one that I'll notably call out here was FWB, which you'd think would be this like very values aligned DAO that we'd be able to work with, and they're like, now we're going to do a C Corp.
Just for the context of audience, FWB is friends with benefit DAO. Like it was.
Well, I
forgot the
think
history.
Friends without benefits because they don't have access to options.
Good one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that, and that's funny.
Yeah.
So I think it is interesting to hear like how different, obviously DAOs are decentralized, they can do it differently, and how one DAO does something one week can be different how they're doing it the next week. Did you want to say anything else related to what Ted was saying, or what Opolis Josh, which is now what I'm calling you, was saying about how these things work and what you've seen maybe at Shapeshift?
I think one thing I wanted to add is just with respect to governance and kind of like that idea of like, okay, things are decentralized, but you don't want to like, bash everybody over the head with daily votes, because then you get governance fatigue. And then the worst thing that could happen is participation goes down. And then you just have a few like, whales who hold a lot of governance tokens voting all the time. And it's bad. It's kind of antithetical to the idea of a DAO. So one way we approach that at Shapeshift that I think is pretty effective is like for things that impact the DAO on a broader level, like should we, for example, funding a work stream for like another 6 months, or adding functionality to a work stream that's going to cost the DAO money, or maybe a high level partnership. These are things that go go through the whole big governance process. But then within like say work streams, we're usually pretty careful to delegate authority to those work streams where they can do various things without having to take things to the community to vote on, because they've been trusted with this. Another thing we do in the context of tokenomics is we have a Treasury Management and Diversification Committee, which is 5 foxes, where this committee will vote on, actually, I should say that this committee has been delegated up to like a certain amount of fox to to use to allocate accordingly on behalf of the DAO in order to, like, diversify the treasury, get more stable coins, things like that. So within that nice little box, the Treasury Committee itself will vote, but that's just like sort of off-chain voting. It happens on Discord. And it's a nice balance between, I mean, when I think about, like, wow, if we had to take all these things on a very granular basis to vote, people would just get sick of it, and it just wouldn't be very conducive to a vibrant governance process.
I think might have took DAOs a little bit of time to realize that empowering humans can be like a really valuable and efficient way of doing things sometimes. So, and yes, of course, it's hard to build trust in an organization where everyone has, just ridiculous aliases. But it does happen, and it's something that, you have to cultivate and use to your advantage when you can. So when you can trust a marketing team to do great work and to hold the Twitter feed, and you don't need a governance vote on every single social media post that gets presented, then that's going to obviously be just one less thing everyone needs to care about, and it's going to be done in a more cohesive, brilliant way. So being able to just, a lot of us here are probably nerds, and automating things and making sure that things can be voted on, and utilizing these great tokens and great networks to do things is amazing. But trusting humans can also be like a really sweet way of accomplishing things.
Well said.
Some of the stuff you were saying about how some of these committees are empowered is really interesting. While we've been talking with different communities that want to deploy DAOs, it's been made pretty clear to us that some of them would prefer things like that over, every single decision being something that gets put up for a vote. So maybe instead of that, you have representatives, and the stakeholders can delegate their vote to these representatives, and these representatives are empowered to do the things. And then if the stakeholders don't like how things are done, they can retract that and delegate to someone else. But I do think like the bulk of DAOs right now are pretty much like this one model where you have a token and it's token weighted voting, and kind of, I mean, a lot of DAOs are kind of centralized or whatever. So a fair amount of stuff gets centrally done, I guess, but anything that, gets put up for vote essentially is in that one way instead of being delegates. I think you guys did something really interesting there.
I would want to push on that and ask you a question though. So leadership and work can be centralized, but as long as the final say, if there's an issue, are you able to remove the benevolent dictator? If the decision making is still decentralized, it's still a DAO, right?
I personally, I don't know how much I want to get into like semantics on it. I guess I don't know how to answer it, because so let's say the DAO says they want something to change, and the result of the vote won't directly programmatically enact that change. Then this is where trust comes into play.
You just described almost all of the things that call themselves DAOs.
Yeah, I know.
Anything with DAO in the name.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are things that, like we want to make it so we'll programmatically change. For example, if somebody wants to put up a vote for changing how the weights would work, like stakeholders in a DAO, let's say they're NFTs, and there's a vote that says the most rare NFTs based on some rarity score should have higher voting power. And that community wants to vote on this. The result of that vote, we want to make it so the result of that vote would programmatically change the DAO, instead of somebody needing to manually do something, after that, like redeploy or something. Like we want it to automatically do it. And there's various other things that you can automatically do. I don't want to downplay, like it is pretty much all the DAOs, right? I don't want to downplay it, but a team can refuse for various reasons, some legitimate that maybe people would be okay with. Like maybe they say, oh, this is illegal. Our team cannot fulfill this for the community. We're sorry. But in other cases, maybe the community, wouldn't be okay with a refusal to do something through voting. So probably a longer discussion.
Yeah, I just want to add something similar to Ted was saying. He automatically categorizes things. From my academic life, I did a few papers on SOKs, which is like systemization of knowledge. And what you're saying is kind of like triggers some of the annoying academic thing. And I want to work on this, maybe if anyone's interested, as like where are the centralization points in like the DAOs? Like as you said, it could be the trust in the developer actually implementing that. It could be that the tokens are distributed in a way that only a few people can just reach the quorum, or like the voting participation is so low that like one person can push the DAO to do something other than others. Like there are so many of these layers which can be categorized and systemized in a way that we can benchmark DAOs and look at DAOs in the other sense. Or let's say the DAO has like 5 people in there, would that be considered like decentral? Kind of, but not really. There's a lot of like those aspects, and I see a lot of them as like, if you want to tap into the traditional word, is like the concept of free market that we reach equilibrium. Like that's the idea, but with DAOs, it's like liquid. Like what Ian was describing is kind of like liquid democracy, that you can remove your delegate and vote directly on any issue. And that liquidity brings this view of chaos if you're like more used to like hierarchical system, but that's kind of by design, and we should be able to like have tools or other ways to visualize in a way that it makes more sense, rather than like all individuals like delegating and undelegating for a specific vote that just looks really chaotic. But there is some pattern in there that we can visualize, hopefully.
Yeah, to build on that for a second, I was always, so if I understand what you're saying correctly, is it if you develop like a working definition of decentralization based on a specific set of agreed upon variables, then you can essentially plot projects on a spectrum relative
so what I did that for oracles as like going through like infrastructure to actually who's participating, where the data source coming, who their data feeders are, how they're slashing. We're kind of like modular based. So similar thing for DAOs could be really interesting.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, I would love to see some sort of standard around measuring decentralization. There's a whole range of opinions on it. Like, if a network, some people are of the opinion, like if a network doesn't have 10,000 nodes, is it decentralized at all, right? And then it's definitely a spectrum. Like you hear various different things all along the way, and various different ways of measuring all of this. It would be cool to have some sort of framework we could use and apply. I guess I don't know if it could ever be an ultimate truth, but right now we don't really have any framework to measure it that I'm aware of.
It's interesting you said that, because like the Oracle paper, we basically the first step is ground truth, and then we go down and we basically say that like we don't want to get into a philosophical discussion of what is truth with capital T here. Like there is like objective or subjective way of looking at this. Like if I ask, like one of the examples I use in the presentation is like, if I ask everyone here, what is the price of ETH? Everyone would use different resources, different currencies. Like it's the same question, same answer might be, but different variables. So the ultimate truth on decentralization is hard, but we can at least try to like have models of looking at it, which makes it simpler to like look at.
If only we had a standards organization.
I was just thinking that. So, okay, we have only a few minutes left. And so with the time remaining, I thought we could, this is sort of taking a little bit on what you were just saying and how we can, I guess, use what we've learned today and our prior experiences in different working environments. So this is a 2-part question, so answer whichever one, but the question is, what can DAOs learn from traditional workforces and what can like the traditional work environments learn from DAOs? Are there any takeaways that like you bring from a different work experience to how you operate in a DAO that you think is useful? Or have you learned anything in a DAO that you take back to maybe an organization or company that you work for that is centralized?
I can chime in on this. I think one of the main things that like traditional corporations can learn from DAOs is direct empowerment, right? Like, so at anybody's company, you may have employees and partners. Perhaps everybody can't like become, let's say, an actual owner of the business, though, depending on its structure and trajectory or whatever. But in a DAO, you might have a product that is kind of expressed through a DAO, and it's not as though participants in that DAO they don't inherently have to be employees, right? They get like a different kind of direct empowerment. I wouldn't call it equity unless the DAO is a security or whatever, but it is more of like a protocol type ownership, or however you want to really say it. So I think traditional companies can learn more about direct empowerment of stakeholders or participants. And I'll let somebody else chime in on the reverse section, or like the reverse direct.
I feel like for reverse one of the main is like the transparency in the communication skills, especially with remote work. I feel like with DAOs, it's also a generational thing, but with DAOs, the concept is built in that everyone's different time zones. Like one of the things that I'm struggling with, like sometimes with like central organization, is the concept of everyone's in the same time zone, 9 to 5 kind of style. But in DAOs, it's async communication, async workflow, which if you can find that sweet spot, like at Consensus Diligence, we kind of found that because we were like all over the world. And it was like when I was done, before signing off, I see that someone else just woke up, they started to work on this project. And that was so perfect. That was like enjoyable to work with, because when you're done, someone else just continuing your work. And that concept in central organization is missing. Everyone like should work together, and after 5, no one cares about work. But it's like a different mental model about how collaboration can work, right? Something that it's harder for central entities because by definition they're central, the same time zone. But now we see after the pandemic, it's not true anymore. Like people live in different places, even though they're business in one like Eastern time zone or any other thing.
Yes. I was just waiting to see if anyone else is going to jump in about that. I definitely think that there's, pluses and minuses on both sides. And it sort of also depends on like a person's personality and their own characteristics, what works better for them as well. Some people I know love the, asynchronous work life, and others really want like, what hours are you going to be there? Specifically, I'll be there at the same time or whatnot. So, but it is definitely a learning curve. If you've never worked with somebody who is in a totally different time zone, and I've worked with someone in Singapore, and we meet at 7 my time at night, and it's 8 a.m. the following day for him. And so you just have to kind of like figure out how it works and be flexible for all of that. We have about a minute left. Is there anything anyone wants to add that we either haven't covered, or you feel like you didn't get any, voice time sharing your thoughts on? No? Okay, let's say how we can be contacted by anybody who's watching. So let's go around and just quickly share where people can reach out if they're interested in learning more. So let's start with you, Cheyenne, and we'll work our way through.
Sure. So I was just like talking to Ted here, but basically my website is cheyenne.es, and you can find all the links from there. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Great. Ted, what about you? Oh, you're muted.
I am muted. I apologize. Yeah, I guess 2wells underscore ETH on Twitter, 2wells on Discord. Yeah, I mean, onehive.org if you want to dive into something that's like a super horizontal thing. I know I'll double plug Shapeshift with other people here. Shapeshift, check out Shapeshift, check out their DAO, and also Gnosis Chain. It's a lot of interesting stuff being built there. It's been great to be on with all you today.
Thank you. All right, Ian and Leon, you want to go next?
Sure. Twitter is the easiest place to get a hold of me. My personal is @FireInTheSlums, and then the secret DAO one is @secretDAOcom.
Yeah, pretty much the best place to reach both of us is probably going to be through Twitter, so secretDAOcom, or probably Discord and Telegram. Discord is secret DAO, and then Telegram, I don't think there's a custom URL, so I can't really shout that out.
It's secret DAO.
Oh, there you go. So secret DAO. If you want to learn about DAO tooling, if you have a community that requires or wants DAO tooling, we live over at the Secret Network, so in the Cosmos space. If you're interested, reach out, and that's the best place you can contact both of us.
Awesome. Opolis?
Yeah, most of the DAOs that are real DAOs are on Gnosis Chain. So just going to give another shout out for Gnosis Chain. Opolis is opolis.co. We're at Opolis, and then you can also find me at 0xjoshua in most places, except for Twitter, which is 0xjoshua.sl.
Awesome. Ken?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Seventh Wave. The number 7 is a T. Or I should say the letter T is a 7. Also, yeah, double plugging Shapeshift Discord. That's where the action happens. And specifically, if you're interested in Shapeshift tokenomics, we meet every Tuesday at 4 Mountain Time on the main stage in our Discord. So come hang out, say hi, and have fun DAOing it.
Josh, how can we find you?
I think more importantly, how can we find C4, which is @Learn More with C4 on Twitter. If you're just joining us for the first time, we've been in the space quite a while, and we love doing sessions like this to educate, developing standards, developing different material to help everyone either new or established in the space. So Learn More with C4 or cryptoconsortium.org is the best way to find me.
And we're going to put everyone's contact information in the description. So if you're watching this later, you'll be able to find everyone who has joined today. So I want to thank you all so much. DAOs are fascinating. It's incredible to learn all of these new things and to hear what different DAOs and different contributors are doing. So thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. Keep listening to our YouTube videos. They're free. We've got free content about CBP and CEP exams that you can use to study for. And yeah. Oh, someone just asked Shapeshift Discord. What is this Shapeshift Discord? I think it's just.
You're muted again.
Let me post that real quick here. I think we have a vanity link, but I'm not sure. Let me grab that here.
I like how Joshua front run that and he said like Opolis.
Yeah, I'm putting them in there. And like I said, these will all be in the links in the video too. So Kent, if you don't have that handy, which I don't either, we can just stick it in the link in the description. So thank you all so much.
There we go. Sorry, it's discord.gg/shapeshift.
Okay, cool. Until next time, thank you, and go learn about Ethereum and open blockchains. And we appreciate your time. So take care. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.